everyone, Jim Branscome from Cinematic Void here. Since it's January and obviously January Giallo here in the Void, I figured I would share my top 10 Giallo films of all time. Now, I put out a list maybe a few years ago and I was kind of revisiting and I've made some changes, based on, things I've watched more recently, time. You know how lists are. Lists always evolve. If your top 10 list never changes, that means you're not watching movies or reevaluating movies. So as of 2024, this is my top 10 Giallo list. And it might be a little controversial, but that's okay. So I'm gonna go from 10 and go all the way up to 1. So just build up that anticipation of what's gonna be 1, what's gonna be on the list. But to kick things off, we'll start at number 10. And I'm sure some of you are gonna say, well, why isn't this number 1? Well, it's my list. Your list can have this as number 1, but my number 10 is Blood and Black Lace from 1966, directed by the great Mario Bava. And I'm gonna shock a lot of you. I'm not the biggest Bava fan. I respect everything he did. I think he was a great cinematographer. I think he's a great director. But for whatever reason, his movies don't move me in the same way that some of the other filmmakers on this list do. And it's not to say they're bad. It's just, it's a taste thing. But, I'd be remiss if I didn't include this movie on my list. Obviously, Bava is the guy that pretty much originated the Giallo film in Italy, starting with his black and white, The Girl Who Knew Too Much, aka The Evil Eye. It was probably closer to the German creamy stuff, which is kind of the films that kind of led into the Giallo happening in Italy. And of course, before that, it's film noir and then German Express. We're not going through history here, but Bava is very important to the genre, and he made some really great films. I think this is my favorite Bava film, and I think it's his best film. You get that black glove killer, but you also get that cool white mask. You get a lot of twists. You get some fashion. You get some good kills. But obviously, you get to see why so many people love and revere Mario Bava. The cinematography in this movie is absolutely incredible, like most of his movies. It's got a cool soundtrack. It's a really, really great film. For number 9 on my top 10 Giallo list, I went with Elados, Who Saw Her Die. This is a really kind of art house, a little bit depressing, kind of a lot depressing, but very dark Giallo film. It stars George Lazenby, who, was a former James Bond, and Anita Strindberg, who is in lots of the Martino Gialli, like Your Vice is a Locked Room and Only Have the Key, as well as The Case of the Scorpion's Tail. She's in other Giallo films too. But this movie is really, really well done. It's artful. It's shot in Venice, and weirdly has strange parallels to Don't Look Now. But this movie predates Don't Look Now. Deals with child murder, and specifically Lazenby and Strindberg's character's daughter gets killed by this killer, and it's just a really well done, solid movie. I remember seeing this movie way back in the day when Anchor Bay put out the Giallo collection box set, which also included another Aldo Lado Gialli film, or some people don't even consider it Giallo, but it's Short Night of the Glass Dolls with Jean Sorel, which is very Kafka-esque, involves a guy that everyone thinks is dead, but he's still alive, but he's on a morgue slab, and he's kind of reliving the pieces of how he got there. Number 8 on my top 10 Giallo film list is a movie that I absolutely adore. It is Orgasmo, aka Paranoia, directed by Umberto Lenzi from 1969. For years, this movie wasn't available on Blu-ray, but the fine folks at Severin Films actually put out a box set with all the Lenzi Carol Baker Gialli. Carol Baker was an American actor who went over to Italy and did a bunch of Eurocentric art house movies, as well as a lot of Giallo films and other horror stuff. But she did 4 films with Umberto Lenzi, and if you haven't picked up that box set, the Lenzi Baker, Baker Lenzi, I forget how it's worded, but it's basically the 4 films they did together, and they're all terrific, interesting Giallo films. This was the first one they did together, and it's got a really great soundtrack. Also, Carol Baker's character in this movie somehow consumes more J&B whiskey than anyone has ever consumed in a movie. It's absolutely incredible. As for Lenzi as a filmmaker, the 4 he made with Baker kind of really, dare I say, very artistic and kind of high class compared to some of the Gialli films he made. He actually has a weird filmography for Giallo films. If you look at stuff like Spasmo and, much later Eyeball, they just all get weirder and crazier. Maybe his most traditional Gialli film is Seven Bloodstained Orchids, which, it's the most conventional out, but all the ones with Baker, they're not really black glove killer movies. They're kind of proto erotic thrillers in a way, you know, just for late 60s, early 70s standards. But, you know, this is my favorite. The whole Baker Lindsay collection is definitely worth checking out, but yeah, this is my number 8 pick. My number 7 pick for my top 10 Giallo films is 1974's The Perfume of the Lady in Black. It's directed by Francesco Barilli, who was one of the writers on Who Saw Her Die, and the movie stars Mimsy Farmer, who's one of my favorite Giallo actresses. Although she did other stuff, she basically got her start in Barbara Schroeder's more, but she did a few Eurocentric horror movies. She was not only in this Giallo, she was also in Dario Argento's Four Flies on Grey Velvet, as well as Autopsy. And I like this one a lot because it's definitely in that Rosemary's Baby, like kind of subgenre within Giallo. All the Colors of the Dark is probably the best example of it, but like this movie's really good. I had an opportunity to show a rare Italian language IB Tech print of this back in 2022. It was really amazing to be able to watch that on a big screen on a beautiful IB Tech print. For my number 6 pick, I feel a little weird having a number 6 because the word seven's in the title. Maybe I should have flipped this with Perfume of the Lady in Black, but you know, truthfully, I feel like this movie's a 6, so, you know, so what, it's got 7 in the title, but of course I'm talking about The Red Queen Kills 7 Times. It's from 1972, it's directed by Emilio Bergala, who also did The Night Evelyn Came Out of the Grave, and it stars the great Barbara Boucher. This one's really cool. It definitely is in that gothic horror meets Giallo strand, sort of like Evelyn is as well. Evelyn's more gothic horror than this one, but it has probably one of the coolest looking killers in any Giallo film, like the white mask, the long black hair, and the red cape, and a cool little dagger. It's a really unique Giallo, and Barbara Boucher is incredible in it. Has an absolute banger of a score by Bruno Nicolai. And yeah, this is one of my favorite. It's visually stunning, and it's a bucket list title that I would like to screen. I would love to find a 35mm print to screen this at some point. Coming in at the number 5 spot on my top 10 Giallo film list is one of the probably most famous titled Giallo films. It is What Have You Done to Solange? It's directed by Massimo Dallamano. Film stars Fabio Testi, Corinne Ball, and a very young Camille Keaton. I think it's pre-I Spell on Your Grave that she's in this. And this is one of the best Giallo films ever made. Absolute killer score by Ennio Morricone. If you look at the plot, it's quite problematic now, especially when you see, well, basically a teacher is having an affair with a student, and the student witnesses a murder, and he can't really say anything because he doesn't want anyone to know how having an affair. But, you know, some murky waters to tread, but it's an outstanding film. The mystery is well done. It's well shot. The DP on the movie was Jody Amato, who made all kinds of, you know, classics like Anthropophagus, Emmanuel in America. This is top tier Giallo. It's got a lot of mystery, a lot of twist. There's a lot of heartbreaking stuff in it. It gets really, really dark, but if you can kind of just go with the flow of the story, it's a really rewarding film, and it's bleak as fuck, and it's well done, and it's easily top 5 Giallo film ever made. For my number 4 pick in my top 10 Giallo film list, it's actually right behind me here. Yeah, of course, I'm going to be talking about The Black Belly of the Tarantula. It's directed by Paolo Cavera, who used to be one of the 3 filmmakers who did Mondo Cane, you know, Goodbye Uncle Tom, a lot of the Mondo documentaries and pseudo-documentary stuff. But, you know, this is, I think it's the only Giallo film he made, and it's really, really, really fucking good. It's basically about someone that poisons people to paralyze them and then cuts out their guts, as it's basically saying that this is how a black wasp kills a tarantula. I didn't know that was common knowledge, but hey, it's a good premise. This one's definitely more on the police procedural side of the Giallo film, but has a top-tier dummy drop for those of you who appreciate such things. Another great Ennio Morricone score. Definitely toes the line of a lot of dark subject matter, and just like, it's borderline nihilistic, but like, you know, it's a really great film, and this is another bucket list title if I could ever find a print of it. I don't even know who has the rights to it right now, but hopefully someday it all gets sorted out and I can do a screening of this movie. For number 3 on my top 10 Giallo film list comes one of the most celebrated filmmakers in Italian horror history in the world, or maybe just horror history in general, and I'm talking about Lucio Fulci, in a film that is on my list here. He's made a lot of top tier Giallo, but if I have to pick one, which I do, A Lizard in a Woman's Skin. This one is incredible. Stars Felinda Balkan, Stanley Baker and John Sorrell. It's got some of the greatest visuals ever put to a Giallo film. It's borderline surreal, like the nightmare sequences are really, really great. And also features Anita Strindberg in it, who was, go back down to Who Saw Her Die. She's uncredited in this movie, but it's obviously her. I think it's before she really had an acting career, but like, you know, her mere presence in the movie has a lot of weight. Again, visually stunning. This was a bucket list title of mine for a long time, and then lucked out that Harry Guerrero from Exhumed Films actually imported over a 35mm IB Tech print of this, Italian language, so we had the soft subtitle when we played, but I got to see this twice in one day. Sat through the tech check and watched it with the audience, and one of my favorite experiences at a movie theater, watching it twice, watching by myself and just getting immersed in it, and then watching it with the audience and watching them get immersed into it. Like, really beautiful, amazing Giallo film. And if you haven't yet, if you just know Fulci for all the zombie films, definitely check out his Giallo work, because this one's great. Don't Torture a Duckling is also phenomenal. The Psychic, you know, lots of great movies. And the film was DP'd by Luigi Coveller, a top-tier cinematographer. He also worked with Dario Argento, and he went on later to do another kind of 80s Giallo film for Lucio Fulci called The New York Ripper, Quack, Quack, Quack. And again, Ennio Morricone does another absolute banger of a score. If you haven't seen it, highest possible recommendation. But I got two that I recommend higher. Speaking of which, my number 2 pick, and this might be controversial, but I plan on defending its placement. This is a movie from 1975. It is directed by the filmmaker that most people associate Giallo films with. I'm talking about Dario Argento and Deep Red, aka Profondo Rosso. Stars David Hemmings, Daria Nicolata, has an incredible, you know, just fantastic score by Goblin, one of the premier horror soundtrack bands. This is Argento hitting at all cylinders. It takes all the things from the Animal trilogy he did, Bird with a Crystal Plumage, Cat o' Nine Tails, and Four Flies on Great Velvet, kind of just filters the highlights of those and just transposes them in this movie. Like, the camera work is stellar. Like, he directs the shit out of this movie. Luigi Coveller, who I mentioned was the DP on A Lizard in Women's Skin, was also the DP on this. And like, this movie is gorgeous. It's phonetic. It is a masterpiece. And I was kind of torn because I feel like maybe this should be number 1, but I have a reason why this one isn't. But it's good number 2. It would make a great number 1 as well, but I have something else in the number 1 slot. And for the number 1 film on my top 10 Giallo film list, it's a movie by, I think, my favorite Giallo filmmaker. He's also a great filmmaker of many genres. He did westerns, Eurocrime, you know, comedies. He did it all, and whatever American Rickshaw is. And I'm talking about Sergio Martino and The Strange Vice of Mrs. Ward. It was co-written by Ernesto Gastaldi, who, one of the great Giallo scribes. He co-wrote all the Martino Giallis, but he also worked on, you know, countless other Giallo films, including The Case of the Bloody Iris and Death Walked on High Heels, just to name a couple. He stars the Giallo queen herself, Edwidge Fenwick. She's in this film. She's in Your Vice's Locked Room and Only I Have the Key, All the Colors of Dark, Case of the Bloody Iris, Strip Nude for Your Killer, countless other Giallo films. George Hilton, who's another staple of Martino films, and probably my favorite villain that pops up in a lot of these Italian genre movies, Ivan Razumov, best known as the Man from Deep River in The Man from Deep River. You know, this movie has everything I think a Giallo should have, and it checks all those boxes. You get a black glove killer, you get a straight razor, you get kinky sex, you get drinking, you get a mystery, you get red herrings, MacGuffins, you get a twist, and then you get another twist on top of it. It is really well done. The cinematography is incredible. There's lots of great sequences in it, and it also has a really memorable score by Nora Orlani. So that is my number 1 Giallo pick. And the reason why I'm ranking above Deep Red, it's like Deep Red, great film, great Giallo film, but this film meets everything that needs to be and should be in a Giallo film. So that is my top 10 Giallo film list. You know, let me know if you agree or disagree with it, or why don't you just share yours? These are only opinions. They're not set in stone. But, you know, we all can agree on one thing. Suspiria isn't a Giallo. Until next time, see you in the void.